Cover Up, Chapter 23, Going for Two. I will go back and record the other chapters. There is no place quiet, Susan Carroll said. This entire building is packed. Except for our studio downstairs, Whitsitt said. There's no one in it right now. He was right, but what in the world could he possibly tell them? What could he know about all this? And yet he had somehow known they were looking for Shoop? If we're going, let's go fast, Stevie said. Another hanging monitor showed the Dreams kicker lining up a field goal from the 25-yard line. If he made it, the score would be 16-10. Can you give us some idea what in the world this is about? Susan Carroll said as they walked to the elevator. Patience, he said. Trust me, it'll be worth your while. They rode in silence down to the locker room level. Because the hallway leading to the locker rooms had been blocked off in anticipation of the game's end, they had to circle the long way to get to the US TV studio. You know, I'm quitting after the game, Jamie said at one point. You are? Susan Carroll replied. Yeah, he said. I'm not cut out for this. I don't know sports, and if it wasn't for you, I'd look like an idiot every show. Stevie thought that sounded pretty accurate, but just managed to stop himself from saying so. There was a guard at the door when they finally reached the US TV studio, but he moved aside when he saw Jamie and Susan Carroll. You guys aren't watching? He asked in surprise. Just have to do something real quick, Susan Carroll answered. The guard shrugged. They walked into the dark, empty room, and Whitsitt found a light switch. There was a round table just to the left of the set. They all pulled up chairs. Okay, Jamie, please tell us now. What gives? Susan Carroll said. Hang on, sweet girl. Let me tell you the story, he said. Only take me a minute. You're going to hug me when I'm done. Not if I have to say anything to say about it, Stevie said. On this, he couldn't hold back. Jamie laughed. Easy, dude. I know she's your lady. And no offense, Susan Carroll, but you're too young for me. Okay, Susan Carroll said impatiently. Where is this going? Whitsitt nodded. You weren't around when Tal first heard we had to interview Meeker. He wasn't happy because of that list of questions we had to ask. You remember that? Of course, Susan Carroll said. Anyway, I asked him why we had to do it if the questions were going to be dumb. He just said, that SOB Shoop. I was like, what? What's Shoop got to do with this? He laughs and says to me, dude, he's got everything to do with this. $5 million a year worth. He said, dude? Stevie asked. Shut up, Stevie, Susan Carroll said. Anyway, I didn't ask him what that meant. To be honest, I wasn't all that curious. We did the interview, and after you left, I said to Vincent that I didn't know much about TV, and I know less about football, but that was awful. He said, you got that right, and just walked away. So, Saturday, I was here doing my rockin' look at the big game piece. You know, Susan Carroll? Yes. And when I left here Saturday, I forgot my tape recorder. Left it sitting right here on this table. This morning, I woke up and realized I'd left it here. I use it a lot to record bits of songs or lyrics. Plus, as you noticed, I'm sure I have a bad memory, so I can use it to remind myself of stuff. I turn it on and say, call Susan Carroll at 10 or lunch with Steve at noon. So today, when I realized it was gone, I came over to get it. Got into the building, no problem, told her where I was going and what I was doing. Got in here, the tape recorder was sitting right where I left it. Someone had delivered the morning papers on the table, and I saw all the headlines about your story, so I sat down to read. He paused and smiled at Stevie. Dude, you probably didn't know I didn't know I know how to read, do you? Before Stevie could answer, he plowed on. Sorry, I digress, he said. I'm almost done reading the story, sitting here when the guard, Josh, he's a good guy, comes in and says, Jamie, Mr. Shoop and Mr. Meeker headed in here. You might want to clear out. I'm like, no kidding, I better clear out. And then I think, hang on, Jamie, this has to be connected with the story you're reading. Shoop is clearly clearly real tight with Meeker. I already know that from Tal. So I look at this tape recorder and I have this crazy idea. I turn on the tape recorder and leave it on a chair. I figure, why not? From what I just read, Meeker's a bad dude, and it seems suspicious that he and Mike Shoop were skulking down here to talk. Steve and Susan Carroll were both wide-eyed now. That was unbelievably quick thinking, Susan Carroll said. Whitsitt smiled. I have my moments. So, I ducked out the back way, took a walk, waited like half an hour, then came back. Josh said they'd been gone for 10 minutes. And? They both said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his micro recorder. There's 20 minutes of stuff, but there's only about 2 minutes you need to hear. He put the recorder on the table, pressed a button. They could hear Don Meeker's voice loud and clear. So there's no doubt it was Brennan. He didn't even try to not deny it when I outed him at breakfast. Good tip on that. I'm sure his Dr. Palarcirio is the one who got them the test results. He would have access? Mike Shoup's voice was just as clear. Yeah, that was my mistake, but it's been taken care of. The doctor who heads up the lab will explain that there was a mix-up in the samples and the testing was faulty. That's great. So we can use that in the interview today? No, Adamson will talk on Monday. Why? Because the banks are closed on Sunday? God, Shoup, are you planning on questioning me once you come to work for me? Stevie and Susan Carroll both gasped. No, I've got 5 million reasons to be agreeable. Don't forget it, Meeker snarled. So we're clear then on what I need to say in the interview with you? Yeah, I've got the questions. And you'll fire the girl today? Yes. Good. She'll be hiding under a bed for the next 5 years. What about Brennan? You bench him, he's bound to talk publicly. Fine. We'll just say poor Eddie got bad information from the docs. He believed it, made a terrible mistake. After George wins the game for us today, no one will care about him anyway. You really think Jeff George can win the game? You kidding? The only reason Kapler didn't play him all year was to prove he knows more about football than I do. George can still throw it 80 yards in the air. Huh. What about CBS? You gonna go to do them now? Have to. They told me they were gonna interview the kids, so I need to defend myself. Keep them honest. Then tomorrow this Dr. Adamson at the lab says it all was a terrible mistake. The league has no choice but to drop it, and then the Lombardi Trophy sits in my office. The kids' story is completely shut down. And the kids with it, Meeker added. Whitsitt leaned forward and stopped the tape. The rest is them making plans after the game, he said. You heard the important part. Susan Carroll jumped out of her chair and hugged Whitsitt. Even Stevie had to admit he was entitled. Told you you'd hug me, he said, smiling. We need that tape, Susan Carroll said. All yours, Whitsitt said, pulling it out of the recorder. And you highbrow journalists always protect your sources, right? I just want to go back to L.A. Susan Carroll nodded and laughed, then hugged him again. Stevie shook his hand and even put her arm around him in thanks. Jamie Whitsitt was about as unlikely a hero as he could imagine, but he was, without question, the hero of the day. I'm going back upstairs to watch the end of the game, Jamie said, looking up at the muted TV monitor in the corner. Looks like it might be a wild finish. Stevie had almost forgotten the game. He looked at the monitor. They were going to commercial. The teams had apparently traded field goals. The Ravens were leading 19-13 with just 4:21 to go in the game. They walked back into the hallway, and Whitsitt said his goodbyes and headed to the elevator. Let's go watch the end from the field, Stevie said. We can do that? Uh-huh. Andy Kaplan told me CBS personnel can go out for the last 5 minutes. They made their way to the tunnel, which was now filled with security people. The CBS badges were magic. No one said a word. They came out of the tunnel into a wall of noise. Stevie had been on the field throughout the week, but that had been with no one in the stands. Now the building was full, and the noise seemed to be coming straight down at them from all sides. Let's go over on the Dreams sideline, Susan Carroll said over the din. Will we be safe there? Stevie asked. Following, anyway. They won't even notice us at this point. She was right. Everyone's focus was on the field. Play had been stopped for the 2-minute warning. Stevie could see that the Dreams had a first down on the Ravens' 31-yard line. It felt as if the pregame show had ended about 15 minutes ago, only it hadn't. The game was 3.5 hours old and now appeared likely it would be decided on this drive. The Dreams needed a touchdown and the extra point to win. Anything short of that, and the Ravens could run out the clock. According to the scoreboard, the Dreams had 1 timeout left. The sideline was crowded with photographers and security people, but they all had to stay 5 yards back from the playing field. Stevie and Susan Carroll were able to slip just in front of them and had a perfect view of the field. They walked about the 25-yard line and could see Eddie Brennan consulting with Coach Skylar Kaplow a few yards away during the timeout. Loud as it was, Stevie could hear Kaplow, who was yelling to be heard. Check at the line, he was saying. See what you've got. Make your call. If you don't like it, we got a timeout left. Don't be afraid to use it. Check at the line means Eddie calls the play at the line of scrimmage, Susan Carroll said. That was what Stevie had figured. Normally he would have made a wise guy comment about having been to a football game before, but Brennan was trotting back out and the noise had gone to another level, so he didn't bother. Brennan stepped into the huddle, said about 3 words. Stevie guessed they were check with me, and the Dreams came to the line. Brennan looked at the defense over and shouted instructions in both directions. Stevie could see his center, Bill Bryant, one of the front of the HGH5, pointing in several directions. Brennan took the snap, started to drop back, then slipped the ball to tailback Omar Nelson. It was a draw play. Nelson had a huge hole. He motored to the 16 before he was taken down. Somehow the noise got louder. The clock ticked away. The Dreams appeared to be in no hurry. What they want to do is score and not give the Ravens the time to come back and get a field goal, Susan Carroll yelled. This time he was annoyed. He knew that. What he didn't know was what he wanted to see happen. Part of him couldn't help but root for Brennan, but he knew he should root against the cheaters, and the thought of Meeker holding the trophy almost made him ill. Brennan was shouting another play. This time he dropped back and waited for the Ravens to rush to come. Just as Terrell Suggs and Ray Lewis looked as if they were going to bury him, Eddie lofted a screen pass to Nelson in the left flat. The play had sucked the Ravens in perfectly. Nelson had blockers in front of him. For an instant, Stevie thought he would score, but Ravens linebacker Bart Scott came sprinting across the field and somehow pulled Nelson down on the 3-yard line. It was 1st and goal. 4 tries to go, 3 yards. The clock ticked to under 50 seconds. Still, no timeout called by either team. Stevie wondered if the Ravens might call one to give themselves a chance if the Dreams scored, but he could see they only had one left too, and they clearly wanted to save it in case they needed it for a last-second desperate drive. Brennan checked the line again. Ben Fay, the team's other tailback, was now in for Nelson. Brennan took the snap, stepped left, then pitched the ball to Fay, running wide. Again, Stevie thought he might score, but 2 Ravens chased him down and wrestled him to the ground just outside the 1-yard line. The clock continued to run, ticking toward 20 seconds. Coolly, Brennan came to the line, took the snap, and spiked the ball to stop the clock with 16 seconds left. 2 plays to try and go 1 yard, Susan Carroll said. They have a timeout, so they can run or pass, Stevie said. That helps them a lot. Brennan looked quickly to the sideline. Kaplan merely circled his fingers as if to say, keep doing what you're doing. Brennan nodded and brought his team to the line. Brennan shouted to his teammates, struggling to be heard over the noise. This time, he faked to Nelson, who dove into the line as if he had the ball, then lofted what looked like a perfect pass to tight end Marcus Arlington in the back of the end zone. Brennan's arms were in the air as soon as he released the pass, but as Arlington gathered the ball in, the Ravens cornerback, Chris McAllister, slammed into him. The ball popped loose. Did he hold on long enough for it to be a catch? The back judge signaled touchdown. Bedlam broke out around Stevie and Susan Carroll. Brennan was being mobbed by his teammates who had left the bench. The score was tied at 19. 5 seconds were left. Only the extra point stood between the Dreams and the Super Bowl title. Hang on a second, Susan Carroll said, shouting into Stevie's ear. She pointed at the referee who was huddling with the other officials. The Ravens were screaming that the ball was wrong, that the ball had never been caught. The referee turned on his mic. The play will be reviewed, he said. The ruling on the field is a touchdown. From behind, where they were standing, boos erupted from the blue and gold-clad Dreams fans. On the other side, where most of the crowd was dressed in Ravens purple, there were cheers. Stevie could see people pointing at the replay board as if to say, look at this replay. Wow, Susan Carroll said. Can you imagine if they overrule this call? There might be a riot. The referee trotted almost directly past where they were standing, with security people all around him, to get to the camera position where he could look at the replay. Has to be indisputable evidence that the call on the field is wrong, Stevie said. Check it out, Susan Carroll said, pointing at the giant board. The replay showed Brennan's pass landing in Arlington's hands just as McAllister collided with him. The ball popped loose instantly. The fans on the Ravens side began screaming as soon as they saw the replay. Oh my God, Susan Carroll said. I don't think he ever had possession. If he did, it was for about .001 seconds, Stevie said. They showed the replay over and over. Each time the crowd on both sides screamed, the referee remained under the camera's hood looking at the play over and over. Maybe he's hoping if he stays there long enough, everybody will go home, Susan Carroll said. Stevie, whose stomach was tied in knots, though he wasn't sure why, smiled. Brian Billick hates replay, he said. He calls it a peep show. Either he's really going to hate it or change his mind in the next few seconds, Susan Carroll said. The ref finally emerged, trotting back slowly onto the field. The stadium buzzed, then went almost quiet when he opened his mic and began talking. After further review, the receiver did not have possession of the ball. Stevie couldn't hear the rest because the stadium had erupted. All of the Dreams people were going crazy, screaming. Stevie saw Kaplow signal for a timeout. It was now 4th down. The Dreams had one last chance, and he wanted an extra moment to calm his players and talk to Brennan about what play he wanted to call. It would probably be too loud to check at the line. They would have to make their choice and either win or lose the game on this play. Stevie took a step to try to get closer to hear Kaplow, but it was impossible. He was talking directly into Brennan's ear, and Brennan was nodding. He started towards the field, and Kaplow pulled him back to say one more thing. Inside the helmet, Brennan was smiling. The ref signaled the timeout was over, so Brennan stepped into the huddle and called the play. Stevie looked around and saw that everyone in the stadium was standing. One play to decide a Super Bowl. I don't really know who to root for, Susan Carroll said, voicing the same conflict Stevie felt. The Dreams broke the huddle. Brennan pointed a finger at Troy Slade and made some kind of signal. A decoy, perhaps? He pointed both right and left, ducked under center, and took the final snap of the season and dropped back. He held a moment, seemingly looking for a receiver. The Ravens had rushed wide, trying to force him out of the pocket before he had time to set up and pass. The middle was open except for Ray Lewis, but just as Lewis started towards Brennan, Slade came in from the side and knocked him off his feet. Brennan tucked the ball under his arm and raced into the end zone, completely untouched. Touchdown. Stevie looked at Susan Carroll. She had an "are you kidding me" grin on her face. They ran ED's special! Stevie screamed. I can't believe it! Brennan was being mobbed, this time for real. Around them, players and coaches were hugging one another. The clock was at 0. Extra point! Extra point! Kaplow was screaming. The Dreams still had to kick the extra point. The score was 19-19. The Dreams kicking team trotted onto the field. Billick used his last timeout. No sense in saving it now. Extra points were pretty automatic, but Billick could at least try to shake the kicker's confidence by making him think about what was at stake. How crazy would it be if he missed? Susan Carroll said. That last play was beyond crazy, Stevie said. I don't know what this would be. The teams lined up. The ball was snapped. Jason Covarrubias kicked it right down the middle. Fireworks began exploding the minute the ball hit the net behind the goalpost. The Dreams had won, 20-19. Everyone on both sides was moving towards the center of the field for handshakes and hugs. Stevie saw Eddie Brennan heading for Darren Kearns. Cameras were everywhere. They saw Kearns, dressed in Ravens purple, race up to his friend. You ran ED special, you crazy. Still works, Stevie heard Eddie yell. I didn't even tell Kaplow, he screamed. Just Troy. I knew it would be open. He had tears in his eyes. So did Kearns. Stevie understood. The media had now been allowed on the field, and cameras and microphones began descending upon them. Let's get out of here, Susan Carroll said. I have no desire to see Meeker with the trophy. I know, Stevie said, but he won't get to enjoy it for long. They headed to the tunnel. They had work to do.